when it comes to positioning like success is an inside job. And what do we mean by positioning? Let's get a definition straight. It's basically how other people see you. And the easiest way I can think of to describe it is, you know, whenever we have a situation where we have a service provider and a client, all right, or even a product seller, but, you know, we'll call them service providers now, because by selling a product, you're still performing a service because, you know, you're serving them. And there is always one of you is slightly senior and one of you is slightly subordinate. This is just transactional analysis. It's very rare you get an equality. Even in things like boards of directors, there's, you know, like you got the MD who's slightly senior to the rest of the directors and things. But in the client-server relationship, we've almost always, it is the client is perceived as being the senior partner, the senior one. There's no good reason for that whatsoever. And the reason we tend to fall into that trap is we do it because that's how it's done. And it's done that way because that's how we do it. And when people come into the client server kind of business, they look at what other people are doing and just take their lead from them. No one ever questions it. Now, our work is predicated almost exclusively, and that's, well, not exclusively, but certainly right at the beginning, on switching that around. So you go in as the service provider, as the server, but you adopt the senior position. You provide the plug hole for their umbilical cord. You take them by the hand and say, it's okay, Mr. or Ms. Client. It's all going to be okay. I'm going to take care of you. Just come with me. I'll look after you. You know, come like Terminator. Yeah. Come with me if you want to live. You know, that's what we do. But the thing is, that has to be that attitude, that persona. It's a leadership position. All right. And we talk about leadership a lot in Core Control and Core Control Elite especially. It's a leadership position you're in. And leadership is not a part-time job. It is something you have to exhibit right from the beginning. I'm going to say more about this as we go through today's podcast. But that's what positioning is, being seen as this slightly senior person. So you are the expert advisor, the trusted advisor, as opposed to being the hired help. Now, just to add one thing before we dig into the meat of it, serving people, and I think this is another problem as well, serving is not the same as being servile. If you think that's the case, never mind the army and the police force, but think about P.G. Wodehouse and the Jeeves and Worcester stories. Jeeves was a butler and was in service to Worcester. But at no point would you have ever considered Jeeves to be servile. On the contrary, he was a gentleman's gentleman. And there's at least one story when he resigns because he disagrees with Worcester, and Worcester was a little bit rude to him. So he just walked out. You don't talk to me like that just because I'm a butler kind of thing. Well, you know, an English butler serves, very much so. That's not what they live for. That's what they train for. They serve exemplary service, but in no way, shape or form are they servile. And we should adopt a similar attitude, I think. So, yeah,
don't be a bitch.
You're not their bitch just because they're paying you money. Now, a lot of the first problem is this kind of idea of imposter syndrome. And I actually see people, and this drives me to distraction. I see actual fucking adults selling their services, posting on LinkedIn, or I do when I was on LinkedIn, saying, I am not an expert. Then what the fuck are you doing selling your services? And they say, I'm not an expert because I don't know everything. Well, you need to get a dictionary, pal, and read it. Because an expert is someone who knows a lot about a topic. If you're telling me you don't know a lot about the topic you're dealing in, and you're selling your services to people who presumably don't know a lot either, you're a liar and a cheat and a charlatan. You know, that's what you are.
Twat.
Big twat, definitely. Big fat twat. Big fat twat with a bald head.
It's like me putting on a carpenter's belt and some carpenter's jeans and going, I'm a carpenter. I'm not an expert carpenter. So when you pay me several thousands of pounds to come in and do your fitted wardrobes, I told you, I'm not an expert.
That could be one reason they do it. Anyway. They can then absolve themselves of all responsibility for screwing up their clients' businesses. I told you I wasn't an expert. But, you are an expert. And more to the point, you should go into a business as a service provider or a product seller as an expert. Because, look, with rare exception, so I mean, if I would say, if, for instance, Dan Kennedy said to me, I want you to write a sales letter under my name. Now, obviously, Dan Kennedy knows what he's talking about. So what I'm about to say doesn't apply. But those cases are outlying cases and therefore, by definition, are very rare. And the chances are most of you are not in this position. And even if you are in this position, the jobs that come along where you are kind of less of an expert than the person you're working with or for are very, very rare by definition. So most of the time, a client will come to you, a prospect will come to you, or say to us and say, hey, EBG, I'm struggling to get the right clients, I'm struggling to get the right fees, I'm struggling to make it happen predictably. Well, in these things, I'm an expert. Okay, so I go into their business. They don't have the knowledge or the expertise to, one, do what I'm going to do for them, or two, even comment on my methods. Because if they knew how to do this fucking stuff, they'd be doing it. Well, they don't, so they're not. And this is not difficult.
I was watching the Dan Kennedy training, the Living Legend formula. I posted about it in our little chat the other day. And he was talking about being a speaker on stage and how he does a lot of speaking gigs. Well, how he used to do a lot of speaking gigs. This is an old recording. And he was saying he's got it written in all of his contracts that they can't get the audience to score the speakers when he's there, which apparently is really common at American conferences and stuff. I had no idea. I Googled it, and apparently it's very common. They get the receivers to score the speakers. And Dan's whole point was, I purposely turn up a little bit angry. I purposely tell people to move everything around. I purposely look really pissed off. I do this by design. I'm not going to have these numpties in the audience who don't have a fucking clue about the subtleties of what I'm doing and have no right to an opinion on speaking. Score me? Get fucked. He was like, I'm the expert here. I know more about this topic than they'll ever do. They're simply there to watch and be entertained. And quite frankly, they don't even know if they really like what they're seeing or not. Me being a bit of a dickhead, there's a reason for that. I'm not having them score me a 2.
Unsurprisingly,
understand it.
I agree completely. Well, it is true. I mean, a great example is copywriting, because it fits the model perfectly, and I've got a lot of experience in it too. If I write copy for a client, as long as I'm not misrepresenting them or their products, I'm not breaking the law, I'm not in breach of any guidelines or any professional services. It's just a long checklist of things which are objectively measurable. The fact they don't like it is irrelevant. They get what I deliver. They use it that way. If they don't want to, fine. That's up to them. If they want to change it, fine. But I don't get into rewrites. I don't get into editing. Unless they've got proper, strong, objective arguments to say, well, you can't say this because it's like not true, or it's in contravention of this rule, or whatever, and it brings us into disrepute or something like that. I don't care. Because I often see copywriters, for instance, bemoaning the fact on LinkedIn that they've attended a meeting with the creative department, and probably 3 or 4 or 5 people around the table have gone through their copy line by line, editing it. So eventually you get a fucking sales letter or a bunch of content which has been written and designed by a committee. Well, the senior managers of these departments, they're not copywriters or sales professionals or marketing professionals, but their egos insist they have an input to what's being said. Well, if you are not presenting yourself as an expert and trusted advisor, that will happen to you. And what happens is, when that copy plummets or bombs, or when your content is just who gets to blame? Well, who wrote it? You wrote it. Well, you didn't. The committee wrote it. But you're the hired help, so you're going to get the blame anyway. There's no way the manager is going to put his hand up and say, yeah, I poked my fucking ignorant, uninformed finger into that pie, and now it's ruined. That was my fault. They ain't going to do that. They're just going to tell it's that fucking stupid copywriter's fault.
If you position yourself correctly as an expert, 99% of the time you're getting hired, it's because you know how to do something that they don't know how to do. And the minute that they start pretending they know what to do, you have to remind them, get fucked. If you was the expert and you know how to do this, I wouldn't be here doing this for you.
Yeah. So that's it. And now,
so
how do we do this? That's the problem. You know, how does this happen?
Well, day zero.
Yeah, I mean, this has to happen from day one. I mean, a good example I've used in the book I'm writing now, Wealth Business Owner, is it's you have to treat it holistically. I hate to use that word, but this time it's accurate. People use it wrongly all the time, but it's holistic. It has to appear.
You wanker! What a shit word.
It has to run through everything you do, like the word Brighton runs through a stick of rock. It's not a Band-Aid you can stick on the sucking chest wound of your insecurity. All right? It's not some... Because, I mean, a good example of this would be copywriters and other freelancers who are posting on LinkedIn, and they also say on their website, I don't just work with anyone. I pick and choose my clients. Fine. Great. Everyone should be doing that. But then you see them complaining in other posts about how they're not being paid, how a client's ghosted them, how a client's pissed them off, how prospects have given them a runaround, how they've attended 17 meetings and all of a sudden then been ghosted, having done a load of work and never been paid because they never asked to be paid. Well, those two things are incongruent. You know, you've got to walk your talk to keep it simple. Now, anybody coming into my world through the podcast, through my books, through the occasional blog, guest post, whatever, doesn't matter, interviews, doesn't matter. Wherever they come into my world, nobody, and I'm talking if they could read stuff I wrote 15 years ago, nobody would come into my world thinking, hang on, John's a pussycat here, and now he's saying he's Mr. Tough Guy. No one comes into my world like that. Everyone comes into my world thinking, shit, this guy's serious. If I fuck him about, he won't work with me. He's not going to give me a discount. I never, ever, not once in the last, I can't remember, so it's at least 15, possibly 18 years, I've ever been asked, can we do something about the price? Can we negotiate the price? Your fees are too high. Can we do something about it? It just doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because everyone fucking knows from the moment they come into my world, this guy won't tolerate it. And that does mean that some people say, I'm not going to talk to him because I want it cheaper. Fine. Saves me a fucking load of bother. But nobody would do it. Nobody would just call. I mean, how long have I been at Elite? 10 years. Everyone in Elite over the last 10 years has had my mobile phone number and WhatsApp. Not a single one has ever phoned me without an appointment. Never. It just doesn't happen. Why? Because they know it doesn't happen. They've been told. No one coming into my world would dream of it. The only people who cold call me are people who are so fucking ignorant they don't bother to do any research. Well, they get short shrift. Because if you're a cold caller and you're supposed to be looking at your target market and picking and choosing them, and you call me, you're clearly incompetent. Because if you did do your homework, you'd realise, actually, no one calls John. I'll message him first and ask him, can we have a chat? I might do it then. But if you just call me cold, no, because you're incompetent. You know, it just doesn't happen. Well, that situation obtains because I'm holistic with it. And I'm holistic with it without any effort because it's actually genuine, it's real, it's part of what I do. And okay, I'm wired up this way, so it didn't take a lot of effort. But it took some effort to get here because when I started in business, I was the same as every other fucker. You know, bending over backwards and a little bit servile with it.